Hello future tech leaders, I am Sindhuja. Based on my own experience, I know that learning the right skills can shape our future. What if I say learning was as thrilled as the tech world itself? There we go. A cloud foundation, that's exactly what you will experience. From day one, you will be immersed in the interactive sessions and expert-led courses that covers most of the widely used technologies in the zone of data science to cloud computing, which brings more light to the life of a techie. I'm so excited to help you and unlock the true potential of a technology. Well, then why to wait? Let's see what it unfolds.
Simple thing. So the same thing you executed, the same project will do like a hello message product only. But we'll see. What is the HTTP request? What is the new event? What are the different parts of the event? That thing we'll see. Okay, I'm creating a project now. When I'm creating a project, we can create project for two ways. One is I'm creating a simple project. This is the project not based on any API implementation. Okay, so if you are designing an API in the design center, we can download that API and we can implement that project based on that API. In that case, we need to download the API. So I told that we are discussing the second stream. First stream is we need to discuss about API design, right? Okay, so I will show you how to download the design, how to implement that design in different way. Now the focus is on how we process the message. Please focus on that. Okay, we will discuss the design concept. We will don't put focus on that right now. Exactly a simple project, and this is the new runtime server we're going to deploy, and the server is embedded inside your Anypoint studio. Okay, right, and simple project. Finish. So if you see, the project got created, yeah. And it has several folders inside the project. We discussed about each and every folder. What is this such /new sort /new? And if you see, there is a flows there in the bracket. So we discussed the flow is the basic building block of the Mute that will receive the message process, the message write. So we'll put all the flows inside this folder. Okay. So there is one XML file got created with the project name when you create a project, right? And if you see here, to get started, drag an operation of score from the new panel. This is the project explorer. We can see all the projects we created over here from the left side project explorer area. I have developed different products, Salesforce SP, Secure Properties, Demos AP. These are all projects I created earlier. Now I created this project, right? That's right, simple project, simple project. And the main area, this is called a canvas, or we do the coding over here from this area in the middle part. And the extreme right part is a component palette. Like I said, we have different kinds of connectors and business side right. So those things we will drag and drop over here and we can develop the integration. These are all component palette, the extreme right side area. And this is also important, part below area right. If below your canvas there are some properties console. These two are very, very important. If you drag in any component, you want to configure that component can be configured using new properties. These are all things you do when you're developing a new hardware application. I hope. Yeah, but anyway, as I explain as a trainer, I need to explain each and every small thing also. Now there are two ways. What I did is I dragged the listener and put over here. Right. So see, when you drag a simple listener, what happens? The flow got created. Center flow got created. Yeah, right. Sometimes no, I don't want. I want to see the flow. In that case, what you do is I create this thing and type flow in the over here flow. And you can see the flow here, core flow, right? If you drag the flow over here, you can see the flow. This is empty flow, yeah. If you see the empty flow, there are 3 sections you can clearly see. Yeah, 3 sections that you mentioned. That's right. Source process, and error handling section. Now what source will do? Source will receive messages from external systems or applications, right? So my requirement is I will send messages from Postman. I will send message from my Chrome browser. In that case, the Chrome browser and Postman and HTTP applications, right? So to receive the messages from HTTP application and to understand those messages, I need to engage HTTP user. So I'm putting HTTP user in the source box, right? So this guy can able to understand the HTTP messages. Then you need to configure a few things. Means at what port in your machine. This guy is listening for messages. Here I'm deploying my local laptop and local desktop so that what I'm doing is my machine is a local host. This is a 00.2 means local host, local machine. That's right, yeah. And this guy is listening for messages in my machine on 8085 port. So the client want to send a message means he need to send this port. Then this guy can able to take that message. Yeah. So if I change to 8082, I need to send to 8082 port, right? So that's it. And I'm just putting this route, this path where we can receive messages in multiple paths. Okay, I put this in there. Just one, just put path as a 1. I can do route also now. Now what I'm doing is I configured one listener to listen messages on 8082 port, right? So once I receive the message, once this guy receives the message, I want to print the message simply. So to print the message, we use the component called logger. Logger is a component. We will print the messages to the console. Yes, in the logger, what I'm doing is I'm printing the messages. The message received is okay. There is some syntax over here. Hash square brackets. Inside I'm putting, that's it. So from the mule event, I want to print something. I want to extract something. So that thing, that component I need to put inside this thing, hash and square brackets. Okay, from the mule event, if I want to extract the variables, you need to put inside variable over here. I want to extract the payload. I'm putting payload over here because I'm sending the payload from the client and that I want to see over here. I want to print over here. Right. The very first thing. Okay. I simply print the payload. Whatever I send to the client. That's it. Okay. So let me deploy this one. First thing is on the project. See in the console error, right? You can see the progress of that deployment. How your application is getting deployed to the server. That is inside this Anypoint Studio. This application got deployed. It's a confirmation. If you got any error, you can see the error over here. You can see this deployment at the status. Deployment means your application deployed successfully without any error. Okay, right? Now you can ready to test your application. So you need to install this Postman client to test your application. Yeah, I do have one. And what I'm doing is, I'm a local host. I deployed my application in my local machine. So localhost. And I deployed to the port called 8082 and path called 1. So to this point, if I send a message, your listener can pick up that message. Your listener is keep on listening at this point. At that point. Your localhost 8082 at the /1. Your listener is keep on listening for messages. Your new listener is keep on listening for messages. From that client, if I hit this one. Okay, what message I'm sending? I'm sending this JSON file, right? From that client, if I send to this point. What your listener will do is pick up that message and it will launch that message. It will print that message. Wow, look at that. Spinner got printed. The message received is this is the message we received from the client below. Yeah, on the Postman, right? And how I printed that one? I extracted from the payload. So in the Mule event, there are 3 sections out there, right? The first section is attribute, second section is payload, and third section is variable. So the data and Postman in the data section, that is go to the payload. From the payload, I'm extracting. How I'm extracting? There is some syntax. Is there? What is the syntax? Has in square bracket. See, this is a HTTP message we are getting from the Postman. HTTP, sir. And how this message look like? It got 2 sections. One is the header section. This is header. This section is header section. And this section some people call as a body section. In the body, I can send XML message or JSON message, whatever I send from this side. Oh. And when it is go to mode, the listener. This guy is the yeah. What listener will take this message and converts to Mule. And Mule even contains 3 sections, right? Yeah. This is attributes in the payload. And this variable. And this variable, yeah. So how user will build this? Whatever the data coming inside the body, takes and copies to the payloads. Right. Therefore, we're able to print the hash. Square payload means you can able to extract the payload and you can able to print the payload. Whatever the things we're sending in body that got printed right just now is all okay. And next we're coming to attributes. So what this is? The header section is copied to the attributes. Attributes, yeah. Now you have to understand what are the headers in a CTP message. There are three kinds of headers. Three types of headers. The first type is the standard headers. Standard. Yeah, these are called standard headers. And I can send a second is body parameters. Body parameters. Body parameters are also go as part of the headers. I see now. And third is URL. So these three will go as part of the headers. One is the standard headers, I see, and the body parameters and URL parameters. These will go as headers. So what Lizard will do? Will copy all these types of headers and put as part of the attributes. Attribute is here, right? Then from the attributes, if I want to extract the, these things. How to extract means hash. Instead of payload, I need to put attributes, right? Attribute is, sorry, my writing is not. It's really good. Much better than mine. Attribute is what kind of attribute? If you want to extract information from a header attribute, you need to give us attribute headers attributes. That's not. If I am sending something a city as an header on a header attribute header city, I'll get the city. That's no header. I'm sending some name as a query parameter. In that case, attributes, not query params. Query param. Query params. Not name. First time we send these two, and later I will discuss about the query parameters. One more, so that name is a variable. All I'm saying is it is dynamic, right? It could change. It could be whatever I set up for the query parameters. Yeah. Got. So I'll go to header and can you go back? What about the URI? Yeah, URI I will let you see. Okay. Because after I discuss these two, I will go to URI. Excellent. First time we send a header as a city. Name us some data. And query parameters I can do to send as a question mark. It's equal to something like I'm saying this data right. See whatever standard headers I can send as a header. These are called standard headers. The city is a standard header. And the name is query parameters. I will append from the URI question mark. I will send the name query parameter I want to send. I want to send two query parameters. Then, and if you want then something like a major is equal to computers. See, it's something. So these two things I'm sending. One is a name and the major, and the third is the city is an header parameter. Now what happens? These two, name, major and city, these three will go as headers, right? These three travel in a header section. And when message receive a listener, what user will do? We take this header section, this name, major and this city, that put inside the attribute section. And this is a query parameter we're passing. Now I'm printing that one using one more logger over here. Putting a logger over here. First I want to print the header parameter. How I print this? What thing I'm sending? Yeah. Attributes dot. Add that something. Attributes dot query. Now see here I need to set the attributes because that is coming as part of attributes. Attributes dot. That query parameter. First I'm printing header parameter. Oh, on the start. I'm printing. So the city one, you just added the postman. That's a standard. This was standard. Standard, yeah. And then what I'm sending? Oh, anything with the URL that has a question mark after that. That's a query parameter. Query parameter. So we're sending two headers right now. Yeah. I'm sending two query parameters and one header parameter. So that's two header, right? Yeah, this one. Okay, this one. I can give it, but this is a parameter. Header parameter. Right now I'm data right city. Right? So these two are query parameters, name and major. So then you should make sure I understand. And the postman, if you go back. In the postman. Postman, yeah. Like I see, right now you are sending two type of headers, right? Yeah, one is a standard like a city. Exit, right? Yeah, right. And the other one is a query parameter. I have the two information. Right. This one query parameter. So we can combine. We can combine all the headers as much as we need. As long as we're sending three types. Yeah. I'm with you now. Because some things you don't want to show the city inside on the URI. Because there is some securities and you want to send them internally. Those things you will send as a headers, internal headers. This is by seeing the URL. I can't understand. No, the city is going because there are name and major only. Oh, you want display. There is nothing you know. I think mistake or nothing wrong to display. Those things you put inside. That's a query parameters. Something you feel. You don't want to display those things on the URL. Then you send as a standard. Standard. Okay, got it. Now it's nice. Now if I want to print the query parameters, I'm going to put one more over here. Query parameter something. The name. The name. Major. Attributes, then you say attributes. Dot. Query parameters. What is the query parameter name? Name, yeah, name. First one. There's some other one, right? Yes, another one. Major is attributes dot query parameter. Make sure the spelling should be same from the postman, whatever. Sending that okay. Yeah, right now you're not in a script mode. Now let me save this thing. If you save, let me see the console. It started. Started means deployed. Now I can send from the client. Send this message. Come back over here, see. There is a log statement, so the inputs. This is a log statement. You see the one log statement at the end. The city from header is Denver. Yo, right. So this is standard header. Yeah. And name and major are hammered. Yes. So these two I'm printing from the query parameters. Yeah? Right. So the point you need to understand and you have to remember is how I'm printing. I'm printing something called the expression. This is called expression. Hash is the expression. This is called data view expression. So what is expression? Nothing. Simple, very simple. Simple, put hash and square bracket inside that. Put the thing whatever you want to extract. Right, so okay. You just say about this syntax or expression is from the data wave. Yeah, this is called data view expression. We have data view transformation language. That is a primary language for transformation. That is a very good topic we're going to see. What is very simple expression to extract the content from the mule event? This very simple expression to extract the content. Oh, so if I can ask you this, yeah? So the listener listened to the message. It find out that was HTTP. It looked to the header. It looked to the body and put the header into attributes area on the body which the payload, but also it converts everything to the mule event. Correct, excellent. But then for processors or not processors. Especially for the logs and others. Yeah, to get some information from that message or from the payload or whatever attribute. To get some information from what? What for the mule event? The utilizing and data wave language or syntax to pull information from the event. Is that correct? Excellent. Wonderful. Excellent. Hamed, you got it. You got it. The point is now we are discussing how we are receiving messages. Once you receive, we can process, right? Yeah, this is the point. This is the exact point to understand how we are receiving the messages inside the mole. Oh, how many ways we can able to receive? We receive the message from the payload or we can receive from the header from the query parameter. So if we are sending from query parameter, how we going to receive that message? If we put header, how we going to receive message? On the header, you set 3 types, standard, query parameters and URI parameters. Exactly, I learned. You know this is a new area, but I learned something from you now that even for like you saying that for security aspect, we don't put that in, sensitive data on a query parameters or URI parameters, right? We have to use those informations in the standard header. Even this is not 100% secure. People can able to hack it, can get it. But we can't see in the URL, at least right by seeing the snapshot URL. We can't see the city. Yeah, by seeing the URL, you can able to know, okay, the name is going and where it is going. The people can misuse this thing, right? They can, but the cities, they cannot able to see city on the URL, right? That's nice. So these two parameters, I think you understand about standard headers and query parameters, right? Now we are coming to the third parameter, that is the URI parameter, right? Well, one thing that I'm curious is that the listener you set it up. It was like the listener was get right. Can you? Yeah, exactly. But you're sending posts, right? When you send a post from Postman. So the listener is still valid. It's not. It's still getting what is get sent. From that port and from that and local hosts to the port is getting that okay. What I was thinking. Okay, alright. So we have to send it so it can receive it here. Now I'm with you. I thought we do. We need a get method on the postman, but we need a post method in the postman. So that our listener, our runtime, can get some information from other sources. Even get our post. When from the postman, when we invoke this point. Locos AA2. At this point, the listener is listening okay. So if you use get right, you can't able to send the body is not. Forget. There is no body. Only URL is there. Okay, we can send a payload when is get. The payload is always empty. If I hit like this, right, see. Yeah, I just changed the get and if I hit, I won't get the payload. If you see the console. See one moment. Let me clear this thing and hit again. If I hit this one right. See the message received is nothing blank. Because get won't carry. The payload body is not there for the get. Only that URL is got triggered. Now we can, but you can able to see the header and this URL parameters, right? Oh, okay. What is different between post and get is, for post, we can send message from the client. But for get, the body is disabled. There is no body for the get messages. Okay, got it. Even in the listener, right in the listener, what your listener is configuring. You can set what kind of messages that is when you want to listen to get messages or post messages or all kinds of messages that also you can send over here. But right now we're not specifying right now, right? All our methods, is that right? Now our method is by default is get and post. Okay, alright, so it listens, both got it. My understanding was that it's only was listening, only getting. It was like only getting. If you are correct, if a requirement says that only you need to understand the post, only get is not allowed means you need to put explicitly on get like post. You put post, it will only allow the post method. If you send a get method, you won't, it will reject that request. Got it, got it. Got it both right now. Yeah, right. Based on your requirement. Now it is allows both get and post. This is allows both get and post. Clear mode. Yes. Now coming to the final one is URI parameter. URI parameter is also. We will send in the URL. See now this is a URL, right? What is a URL sending? So this is called URL. put for that will go here. This is a URL, right? We are sending. So this part. This part is the same, right? Actually, actual URL, and afterwards, after question mark, this part is parameters actually. Oh. Parameter starts after question mark, right? And URI parameters you can send as part of the main URL. This is called main URI and this is called parameters. This query params. This part is query params, right? This part is query params. This is called main URI. Okay? And if you can send a parameter using the main URI, that's what URI parameter. Like I can send like this. Host. Map is 8.82. I want to send some country information over here. So /1/US. Question mark and the query parameters start name is going to blah blah blah, something like that. No, I want to send the country information, right? I'm sending USA here. And next time I will send a /1 /Germany. I can send whatever country I like, whatever information, right? I want to send as part of the URL, right? So now this is called URI parameter. Germany or USA, India, I can send whatever country. It depends upon your requirement. I want to get all the details from the USA. I will send USA as a UI parameter. You want to get details from Germany? I will send Germany as a URI parameter, right? So that's the URI parameter. I will send it like this. Now what I'm doing is, so in the post I'll change modification. /1/ I'm putting USA. Now in the new line, I need to pick up this information, right? I need to take this information, right? What kind of modification I need to do is after one, right? I need to put /. And here what I need to send is, how can I get that after one? See, after path after one, I'm sending country information, right, USA. And I want to get that information like $. I'm putting as country, okay. So here in the path, I'm putting $ and country means. Whatever from the client, whatever the country name I'm sending here, that is captured inside the country, this country parameter, right? So I'm putting them rather over here and here. So country. Same attributes dot. This time I'm putting the URL parameter URL. Dot. What is the parameter name I've given? Country. Where I've given, where it is seen, right? So country. So this country, I've given the listener itself. Here, this thing is a little different. I'm giving country. Yeah. And from the postman, what I'm sending this URL. I'm conferring in the listener. Rest of two, I'm conferring the client itself. See city parameter. I'm conferring in the client. Client means your postman. Okay, name also. So now you're sending all 3 headers. Yeah, exactly all 3 attributes. All the kinds of headers that come to attributes. Yeah, all the 3 attributes. All the attributes, right? Attributes.header, attributes.url parameters, and attributes.query parameters. Yeah. Alright, let me see this one again. I'm not sure, it's not quite. Let's start over. Okay, I've started right. So let me hit this one again now. So you can, yeah, you see it. Good, I see that. If I the postman in place of country, I'm sending now. Canada. Would I send Canada? Yeah. Now we receive as countries Canada. Right. I hope you get informed, Just a little bit idea about all the parameters. Right. Query parameters, header parameters, URL parameters, and the payload. So all of them, 3 of them. This is common. Is this? It's common in the sense. From the client, we will receive information on this base only. There's only 4 ways. One is as part of the payload, or as part of the query parameters, either part of the header parameters or as part of the URL parameters. Apart from that, we won't receive the message in any other way from the HTTP client. But do they? Do they like? My understanding was that it might be only. Maybe they only send it like a. No, so right now, like your example, you're utilizing all 3 different headers. That depends upon your business requirements. So in some requirement, you want to send the departments as a URL parameter or country. Okay, If you want to send certain information to CS department, you put the sales as the URL parameter. That all depends upon your business requirement. How functional, how you want to send information from your client to main events. But these are the ways how we can send information from client to Mule. Event is Mule, listener is. These are the ways you can send as a query parameter. That whatever your wish is. That depends the design of the project. The URLs depends upon the project to project. Excellent, excellent. Alright. That's really nice. If you clearly understand this message, transformation means how the event is transformed to Mule event. That is very, very important and we need to focus on that. Okay, that's right, that's right. That's very basic link. Then, and you can see. Like I said, you can see the documentation also. That is also very good practice. Event processing. Processing in MuleSoft. This is old one, quite old one, inbound property. Inbound property. This is new tree, not this one. Okay. Explain about the old one. You don't confuse about these things. The old one, new one don't need. Focus on only new one, only new for only. New for right. Yeah, new for only. So I will share the resource also. What resources you want to go through. So good man. Thank you very much. New mule processing. This is the one we discussed. Processing. Sir. This is the thing I will give you in the chart. Go through this one. Yeah, put that in the chart. Yeah, this is important. And new for production domain. So complete this article today. Right. And if you feel a little complex, okay, don't do that. Okay, whatever. So I can explain you on that. I will do work and I'm concluding right now. But any questions? Put this point. The two major things. One is about API development. This one stream okay. This contains API design. What is the best practices in API designing and Ramble API? How to manage the API, how to share your API. So that's the API segment. And the second thing you told right about API development. API development itself, but its API implementation. This is design. Sorry, this is not. It is design, not a development. This is design and this is implementation or a development. So these three areas, we need to focus these two areas. First thing is API design and API implementation. Nice, I like that. So yeah, Allah can simplify stuff nice. Excellent. So API design and development design thing we do in a component called Anypoint Design Center. I hope you already registered with Anypoint platform. You might have seen Anypoint Design Center also, am I right? Anytime it's a design center, right? Yep, I do have that already. So when you get into the MuleSoft project, the first thing the project may want to ask you to see the design. How further for a specific business requirement? How is the API design? Is the design? What are operations inside the API? How you design the API using RAM and that stuff. So you need to focus on designing the API using RAM. What are different resources? What are the how to design query parameters, URI parameters, all the stuff you see in the design part. Yeah. Okay. In today's session, my roadmap is I want to cover a little bit about design and a little bit about implementation. So you will get an overall picture of the API design implementation, and you need it to drill down into those concepts and come up with the questions in the next session, right? Excellent. In the regarding API implementation, you need to know how the messages got processed in the Mule. So what's this API you designed in the design center, and the same API you are going to implement in Anypoint Studio. Anypoint Studio is the ID. Where it has complete infrastructure means it has connectors loaded with connectors, transformers, all the stuff. Using those components, you can able to implement your API, whatever the API design, right? So while you are implementing that API, you need to have an idea about how the API receives the messages. in what way it receives the messages, and how it processes the message. Okay, from the postman. You said from the postman. I send a message to a Hello World application you develop. Write in Anypoint Studio Hello World application. And this application processes the message received from the postman, right? But underlying there are something all this, how the message received from postman to your Mule application. In what format the message received the Mule application. And how this Mule Hello World Mule application process that message. What internals of that message, that thing you need to know, right? These two parts. First part is about the design and second part is about the implementation. Right. So I will come from implementation design. Just first discuss a little bit about implementation and I'll come to design. Alright. So let me share one of my slides about implementation. So to understand the basics of the means of implementation. You need to understand what is the role of the MuleSoft, integration. So, MuleSoft is an integration which is connecting multiple systems and multiple applications, right? That's right. So, you can treat MuleSoft as a broker, right? This middleman sitting in the middle of so many applications, a broker, right? So, when you are working as a middleman between applications, you will get different kinds of messages. Means you will work as a broker between different kinds of application messages. That's right. So what I meant is you might be this. You means you are calling as a MuleSoft integration as you might have okay. MuleSoft integration, MuleSoft ESV or integration, or this guy is sitting between applications. Okay, this one. So this guy have chance to receive messages from HTTP client. HTTP client means it might be a browser. It might be a postman kind of thing. It might be an application you developed using HTTP components, right? So it will get messages from HTTP clients. And it will get messages from the messaging clients. Messaging clients, right? Atoms, private and type MQ, Anypoint, MQ, these are called messaging clients, right? Right. The MuleSoft may receive messages from the messaging clients. MuleSoft can receive messages from the databases. Means these are all sources. We call as a source. From where MuleSoft is getting messages. What is source systems, right? So from databases. MuleSoft might be readings from the database tables and getting messages. Right. Yeah. Or there are some FTP server is there. Somebody puts file in the FTP server. Some different application put the file in the FTP server. And MuleSoft receiving messages from the FTP server. We're receiving files from the FTP server. Right. So, likewise, so many source systems are CRM, so many source systems are there. MuleSoft will be receiving messages from these different kinds of systems, not in one single system, right? So again, Is this also what they also call a connectors? Yes. They're same, right? Sources and connectors. MuleSoft has different connectors. HTTP connector is available. So that HTTP connector talk to HTTP client. And JMS's connector is available. That JMS connector talk to a specific JMS client. DB connector is available. So MuleSoft has all connectors packed inside to want to talk to the different systems. MuleSoft use that kind of connector, so there is some framework. You can develop your own custom component. And you can be able to connect that one. But most of the time, you won't get that kind of requirement is very minimal. But in case if you get such requirement, you need to develop your own connector. And that's doable in the tool. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Now the fundamental here you need to focus is UR. MuleSoft is receiving different kinds of messages. Are these all the messages same or different? Can I say HTTP message is same as a database message? No, right? It has some need to, such as HTTPS is some need to structure and database has need to structure. Then MuleSoft has capability to understand and process all these kinds of messages. That's right. That's right. Right? So right. Then how the MuleSoft is designed, how it is designed to understand and process all these kinds of messages. There is a component inside MuleSoft we're going to develop. That component is called a flow. Flow is a basic building block of MuleSoft. A flow is a component that receives a message from external world, like different kinds of sources. And process the message and it replaces back to that component or any other component. So flow is a basic structure. Like any software component. What will do it? It take the input and process and use our output, right? Any software component. Yeah, right. Similarly, MuleSoft also takes the input, process it and use the output. In similar fundamental thing, the flow is the guy who takes the input, process it and sends the output. So you need to understand this basic building block of flow. So you will go into different kinds of flows as part of your MuleSoft journey. Then you need to understand about the fundamental of flow. What is the flow? What is current contents? The flow contains three important parts. The first one is the source. It's placed for the source. And this is the process. And one more section is called error handling section. 3 sections. It contains 3 sections. One is the source section, process section, and error handling section. So in MuleSoft there is some requirement. You need to receive message from HTTP client. And you need to store that message to database. You got such requirement. Your manager asks you, our client will send a message and you need to store that message to database. That is a business requirement you need to do, okay? Alright, so let me go back to my slide once. Sec. So this is business requirement from the postman. I'm sending this data. This is a record of one employee. And your requirement. You need to store this information to database table. Okay, right? So here I'm showing this is a flow. This is a diagram of flow. If you see there is some partition, You are seeing, right, some dashed line, dotted line over here. Yeah, so this partition, the first thing is a source. This area, this place is source. Yeah, and after partition, this area is called processing area. Okay, and down you can see error handling area. Okay, this is called error handling section. It's 3 sections. And you will ask, okay, boss, from where we are getting messages? Your boss told, okay, we are getting messages from the HTTP application. Then what you do? You will configure HTTP in the source. The listener, yeah. Okay, because you are getting messages from HTTP client. That's right. But in some case, you will get messages from one database and you need to put the same message to a different database. In that case, instead of HTTP listener, you put the database listener. If it is, the listener will be database. Database in case, yeah. In case, source is also database and target is also database. In that case, the listener is the database, right? In some case, your boss told, okay, there is some file from FTP server. Get the file and store the information inside the file to database. In that case, the source is you put FTP server, FTP listener, not an HTTP listener. I know. So Ganesh, yeah. Even though if it's FTP or the database or HTTP, we will still call a listener, isn't it? Exactly. Listener is a guy who is listening the information. Therefore, you call a listener. So if it's FTP, we don't call something else. Still listener, but behind the scene it could be FTP. So the thing is the inbound part. The inbound part means we are receiving message from the FTP database HTTP. The inbound. We call it listener. Because we're listening the messages. And there is some outbound component means that is giving back the messages to that end systems, like we may push the information to HTTP or we may insert the information to database. Those different connectors are there. Those are outbound. Those we can't call as listeners. Yeah, but outbound, the receivers are called listeners. Got it. So if you see there is some HTTP, this is called. This guy takes the messages from external. This is therefore is called listener. If you see an HTTP, see the request is, that is not listener. The request means it will push message through some other HTTP system. We will send messages from the mole. We send the message to other HTTP system. So therefore called, this is an outbound call. Listener is inbound. Request is outbound. Right. In similar way, we have the components. Those can receive messages from external world and they can send the message external. The two different components are available. So those components, those we are receivers, those are listeners. Got. So now, in this scenario, one moment. So, if you observe the flow, the source HTTP. This is the source. And the process. We will receive this message from HTTP and we convert that message in a way that the base understands using the transform message component. Okay, right now I'm saying at high level, we're going forward to see what is transform message, how we will transform that things. Now, after transforming, we are inserting the message to database. Right. So this is called processing. Transforming and inserting is called processing. This is called process section, processing section. And while transforming, you write a query. some bad syntax inside. Some insert query contains some bad syntax. Some field name is not proper. Then you will get some error, right? Okay. To handle that error, you get a error handling section. Here we will see, we send back to information back to client sender page. Whatever the query is wrong, you need to write to correct part of the query. So that thing is sent back to client who called that. Maybe that information will log to logger also. So this contains a handling section, right? Yeah, so this is a basic link block. You receive the message, you process the message, and by processing you got any error. You manage that. So this is the flow. Any doubt to this point, Adan? What do you think? I really impressed. I really liked how you simplify. Thank you. How you explain very well. Second point, this is the flow if you understand. We will move to the second point. Then how the message is not processed. So, as a Mule is a broker, it is receiving different kinds of messages. Go back one here. So, Ganesh, 1 second. Yep. All the brokers, the broker section you mentioned that gets the inputs and listens to the message. Use that flow to process it and then creates output or, including error handling and everything. Yeah, so is that like ESP or ESP is all? It's not right. It is a kind of component inside ESP. The ESP is what? What is the ESP? It is a message broker itself. ESP is also, they call it something service bus. Service bus. Yeah. Service bus means the ESP is a kind of connectivity between applications. That is called a bus. Oh. So the flow is work as a bus between one application to some other application, right? The message will flow through the bus. Yeah, flow through the flow. Right. So from the source, the message reaches the flow, and from the flow, it reaches the target. So it's acting as a bus, right? Yeah. So therefore, it's called a bus. It's part of the bus only. Part of the means the entire ESP not only contain one flow, it contain multiple flows. Okay. So we can say that one single flow is an ESP. An ESP contain multiple flows. Got it? Got it? Now, if you see my current slide, see here even source. These are different kinds of sources like HTTP, JMS, SMTP. From mail also we can get the message FTP database. And see, these guys are the components from the new land. They will understand the messages. So, with the message coming from HTTP, I will put HTTP listener in front. So, assume like a business scenario. You have a large business, right? And you have clients like German client and you have a Spanish client. You have Portuguese client, right? But your employees can understand only English. Okay. Your staff understands only English and your business got grown up and different kinds of come. Now, this is your business and there is a guy working for you. These guys understand only English. He doesn't understand any kind of other Spanish, German language. So tomorrow a new client come with a new language. So do you ask your staff to understand that language? Right. Yeah, so he has a new language, right? Yeah, a new language. So how do you manage your business? Because your staff understand only English language, only English. Yeah, they won't understand different kinds of languages. But your business has grown up and you are getting different clients. So I need a translator, right? Yeah, exactly. You would just put in one translator and this guy understands the German and this guy explains in your English, right? This is the best business model, right? Yeah, so you can't ask your employees to learn different kinds of languages. They need to focus on their work. Yeah. They don't focus on different. What language they need to learn, right? That's right. Similarly, you have two different components in Ubisoft. One component responsible to talking to other systems. This is only responsibility. This guy won't process anything. This guy won't work right. What is responsibility? Only understand the incoming message and translate that message to the guys who work in a way that they understand. Yeah, that is the responsibility of this guy. And those guys are working on the message. They won't bother how to connect to that system, how to talk to the end client, what we do. They won't bother about that. They only work on the message. Got it? The similar kind of thing. If you want to talk to different kinds of end systems, if you want to deal with different kinds of clients, what you do, you will engage different kinds of people. One set of people talking to the end systems or end clients and getting the input from, and they will transforming the way the staff understands. Okay, once this staff initially their work, they will do output English. English output to your translator or your connector. And this again transforms to the guy. For example, we get the information, we get message in German, right? So the German work order takes this translator and it transforms to English and explain to your staff. Your staff work on that requirement. And they will give the output to your translator. Your translator again transform that work to German way and understand to German language. So this is way right. In similar way, if message comes from HTTP client, assume now comes with technical way. If message from HTTP client, yeah. So HTTP client will send HTTP message. Okay. So you will engage HTTP listener. So that guy able to understand HTTP message. That's right. You will have HTTP listener, though you can engage that listener. And your staff can't understand HTTP message. And what kind of message the event processes understand? A new term is called event processes. One term is event source. I'm sorry, I'm trying to explain this thing. Event source and event processes. The two major components in the new flow. Event source is a guy's listener, nothing but listener. Okay, listener or event source. What does you? You need to understand different kinds of your terminology because the means of the blogs or articles and everything explaining this kind of terminology, event source and event processes. Event source is called listener or inbound, whatever right its receiver. Receiver or inbound or event source or listener, whatever. So this guy is called event source and event processors are They will work on the message in this example. Whatever I explained here, right? I explained here what is event source is. This listener is event source, right? Getting message next time on. What are the event processors? These two kind things. Transfer message and select message. Insert, actually not select insert. These two are event processors. Oh, they're working in the message, right? So similar, this event processors cannot understand the incoming message. They will understand only one kind of message, that English message. The English is equal to Mule event. How to process? They only know how to process message. They don't know exactly. Yeah. What type of message it is and what you know what contain. So the common format is called a Mule event. They can understand only Mule event. Mule event. Then whose responsibility do you know? Get the incoming message and convert to Mule event. The listener. Listener? I think that's the question I had. Actually, I'm glad. Excellent. Excellent. You read my mind. So not only in listen is the message. I mean for some of the HTTP. One knows how to listen the HTTP message, but also it also converts to Mule event. Excellent. Excellent. Fantastic. You understand it. And then those guys know how to process Mule events. Yeah, that's the catch over here. This is a foremost, very important fundamental. Most people understand this. Please understand, your use of journey is very smooth. The point is the listener is a guy, is only not only understand the incoming message, but also builds the Mule event and handovers that Mule event to the processors. Right. So that is very important point in the Mule fundamentals. That point you need to understand. We see demo also. This part we see demo also, then it's clear, yeah. So it's really good. So to take, let's do one more step. Yeah, sure. What is when we're saying that it converts to the Mule events? We're talking about the JSON or XML or some other. That's what we're saying, right? In high level. Yeah. We are very close. We will talk about that one. Okay. Now, if you understand this, slide right when the message coming from HTTP. Message structure is always same. Every message structure is always same, but they're different. Means message coming to two parts. One is header and payload. Right. So the payload is a part where it contains the core business message. That's right. Right, like if I'm sending Excel from my postman. So whatever XML I'm sending, that will travel inside the payload area. And the header is give information about the payload. Means in what way it is going. It will be XML format. And if you are sending any security credentials, then that security things will go inside the header. Header will help the payload, but payload is a core business message. Yeah, right. So every message structure seems same. But to understand that message, you need to have a different kinds of user at the Mule end that knows how to process the HTTP. One that knows how to process the GMS. So I understand you saying that. So you know the standard is for the message. It contains header and payload. But the header HTTP client and the header in a SMTP client are different. Correct, exactly. But that listener knows how to. They are experts how to. Listen and process to each of these clients. And that's really good. That specific listener know how to understand that kind of message. Yeah, event source. So it looks to me everything all right. So the first two HTTP and GMS client. You have a listener and event source, while the rest of each one is different. Yeah, correct. We don't call them listeners. We call them. They given a different name based on the business context. CFTP client means. This is called an FTP, actually FTP server, from the FTP server. When you want to read the message. Sorry, files from HTTP server means. Whenever a new file is added to FTP server or whenever an existing file updated in the FTP server, then only we want to read that file. Okay. FTP server has 100 files. We don't want to read 100 files every time. Yeah, only new ones. Right. Only newly added file you want to read, or any existing file if updated, that file you want to read. Therefore, it is a new or updated file. Yeah, on database. Database contains 100 rows. First time it reads 100 rows and it processes it. Next time it won't read the 100 rows. On table row, if anybody adds the new record to database, then it want to read that new record. Yeah. Okay, therefore, name is on table row. Got it? Got it. Where the other one is? They listen for any incoming message. Correct. Well, this one is the, the Reddit and they know the status of those. For example, the database where the last record was. Yeah, and when there's a new record, then that's when they will read. Correct. So, and what this listeners will do is this listeners will build a new limit. Right. So they take this message. Listeners take this message, a header and tailor message, and it will build the new limit. If the message comes from database, it receives this message, database message, and builds the new limit. Then why they are building new limit? What's the reason they're building new limit? They're constructing. So yeah, so that the processor understands. That's what the processor understand is how to process a new limit. Process understand only new limit. They don't understand HTTP SMTP. No, they won't bother about that end message. That's right, they won't understand. So those guys are like translators, right? Like you were saying, example of a language. It's in some way you can remember like that. Excellent. And we can then. Now we need to understand how this new limit is built based on this input. That is also very important. I will combine this one. Let's see. See, as you see the script request. New limit contains 3 parts. Let me show the new limit. It contains 3 parts. First part is attributes, payload and variables. So this new limit will flow from processor to processor inside your new flow. This new limit will flow from processor to processor because here in the new I have two processors, right? The first guy the user prepares a new limit and handovers that new limit to the transfer message. And transfer message will process that new limit and the processor to new limit sent to the second. Select this component. That's right. So new limit will flow from processor to processor. That thing. That's one of the second point you need to remember, right? And what is a new limit? What is the? It contains the three components: attributes, payload, variables. So how the attributes, payload and variables are built from the incoming request. So here what happens is whatever header things will go to the attributes section. Or the header is the attributes. Yeah. So what user will do? It takes the header from HTTP request or an incoming request and put that header section to the attributes section in the new limit. Copies the headers to attributes. And the data section, data payload, that copy to the payload section. And initially variables are empty. Initially, once when the user converts, that point variables are empty. But going forward, when processing the message, we can add the new variables that we'll discuss tomorrow. Tomorrow means in the next session, we'll discuss about the variables that I don't want to. Yeah, I would love to have one tomorrow to continue this. We'll talk about it, your availability after the end of the session. This one I would demonstrate, and can you know, subflows and variables is very important concept. Second concept I would like to cover about HTTP request component. Once you finish this one, I will go to the API area. That is the agenda. Let me briefly, in 5 minutes, let me recap what we discussed so far in the last session. See, we start our journey with understanding the message processing. So message processing is very, very important. Why we start the message processing? Reason is Mule need to process different kinds of messages, not only a single kind of message. We need to understand different kinds of messages. So what we discussed is there is a flow component. Flow is a very basic component of the Mule. It will receive and process the message from external. So the flow component contains primarily 3 sections. The first section is a source section and second section is a process section and third section is the Mule section. The source section depends upon the source from where we are receiving the message. Based on the source where we are getting message. If the message is coming from HTTP, we place the candidate that is able to understand the HTTP message. That is HTTP listener. We place HTTP listener. Based on the source, we configure this source component. So what the source component will do, it will receive the HTTP message. But this HTTP message is not understandable by the process components. Process components understand only Mule message, Mule event message. The source component will transform the incoming message to the Mule event message or Mule message and hand over to the process components. Process components will work on that. This is one of the basic. This is the first point we covered. And the second point is how the event components look like. It contains 3 sections. See, once the source creates the event component. The Mule event component contains 3 sections. It is very important. Attribute section. Attribute is, and the payload. Payload section. Variable. Variable section. To access the specific section, we need to use expression language. That is as in square bracket. Put the payload here so that we can able to retrieve the content of the payload. So this is Mule event is very important. This will travel across your flow from starting to ending. Everything happens on the Mule event object and at the end the process completes. What happens? The last component gives the Mule event back to you, your resource component. Source component again transforms that to the HTTP message and sends back to layer response. HTTP response back to the client. Okay, so last point. You've seen that after it gets processed, right? Yeah, right? It sends back to the requester or the connector. So this request, So the client doesn't understand the Mule event, right? Yeah. So what is going to do again? Once again transforms the way the client understands. So that again has HTTP request, HTTP response, and then sends back its response to the postman or whatever component. Alright. So when it sends back to the HTTP or to the listener or whatever, or the source, when it sends back to the source, then is that format. Is the Mule formatted message or is it going to be like? Is it going to be transferred to another format or is it going to be Mule event? Yeah, the Mule event is not understandable by your source component, right? If you use the Mule event component source, this source understands the Mule event. What this guy do again, it transforms the Mule event back to HTTP message. Okay, got it? So when it sends back, it will be HTTP message, correct? So the listener understands HTTP. Correct. Because that's what the original source was. Got. So basically, this is the concept we discussed in the last session. Now let me extend the session and discuss about. The first component is the subflows and variables. First, we'll talk about the subflows and variables. Okay? So let me open my slide on subflows and variables. So we'll talk about what is subflow and next is how to call a subflow and what are variables and the link between subflows and variables. So this is again on the offline session. Now we discussed about what is subflow. So as your developer, right? So in your program, maybe Java or NNT, Java or Python, whatever programming language, you have a requirement like a piece of code that used multiple places in your application. the same piece of code used in multiple places in your application. So, do you write that piece of code everywhere it requires, or do you write in one place and you call that with the first? So, how you do? Usually we write something like methods or functions, right? You know methods or functions in programming languages. So why we do the methods and functions? The same piece of logic, same logic is using multiple places in your application. So we won't write the duplicate logic everywhere. What we'll do? We write that logic in one piece, okay, in one place. That we call it a method, and this method is called wherever it is required. Right? So this uses the reusability of your code. Right. So what is the advantage of reusability? Is it gives your application more consistency. For example, this is the code that is connected to some database. Using this code, you are connected to the database. So you need to change something in the database configuration like password or database whatever. So what happens is if you write the same code in multiple places, you want to do some change. You need to go and change everywhere in every place. Right? Sometimes developers do change here and here, then they forget to do here so that the code is not consistent. Right? Yeah. So what the fundamental is, we need to wrap that common piece of code in one place and we need to use that from that place. Similarly, in the Mule, to make a reusable component. That reusable component is subflow. A subflow is simply nothing but a block of reusable logic. That's right, yeah. So ideally we discuss about flow. Flow contains 3 sections. Flow contains sections like a event source. Because it has to receive message from external world. Right. And in case of subflow, do you think subflow also requires event source? No, it has to be the main source. Yeah. Subflow is simply a reusable logic so that it doesn't need an event source. Only a set of event processors only. That's right. So there is a main flow that can call the subflow. Excellent. Fantastic, Adam. Main flow uses a subflow. So therefore, subflow doesn't require the event source. It won't get message from external world. Only the main flow is a candidate to get the message from external world. It will use as the subflow. Right. So I have one more flow, one more main flow. This main flow also may call subflow. Same logic, yeah. This is flow A and flow B. Flow A is using this logic and flow B is also using this logic. I can call this subflow in multiple flows wherever this logic is required. Yeah. Now one more very important point. In subflows, most of people confuse and they misunderstand this. This point is very key to understand. Please listen carefully. So usually, if you are from Java background or Python background, what we do is we write some methods like this. For example, some method. Some method takes integer a and integer b. What this sum method do is, it returns a plus integer b. Something like this logic will be there here. I call the sum of passing 3 and 4. So what it returns? Something like 7, right? So here, if you are from the programming language background, it is nothing, but we are calling this functionality, passing these as inputs to this method. And whatever execution happens here, and the execution result will back to the main where we call it. Yeah, right. So if something I'm collecting over here, index is equal to sum. Now x is equal to 7 over here. It's like this usually in programming languages, but there is some difference in the Mule. Mule works in different way. It is like this. For example, I have some main form. Main form receives a message from external world. From some postman, I send some message. So what happens is I write a subflow. And I have some components over here. Some components define the subflow. I will tell you what is a component, what different kinds of components are available. Okay, this is main flow. This is subflow. So what happens is I have a component called the flow reference. Using the flow ref component, I can invoke or I can refer the subflow. Use this flow ref component. The flow ref component will ask which flow you want to refer. Here I can tell, okay guys, please refer this flow subflow. And this flow has name. Subflow is the name of this flow. And I use the reference as subflow. If you can see, you can refer the subflow. So to configure to call the subflow, what happens is here, whatever the components inside the subflow. There are 4 components here, right? These 4 components will come and replace this component. Now the flow is like this. So wherever if you refer a subflow, all the subflow components will become a part of the main flow. Okay, now the mule event comes and travels like this from this and this. So these 4 components are from subflow, right? But if you refer a subflow, all the subflow components become part of the main flow. This is the point we need to understand. Yeah, but I have a question. I understand exactly what the flow reference means here. Yeah. But even though it's going to function like the subflow with a flow reference, like you said, when you have a flow reference, whatever that it's referenced to, it will look like it's in part of the main flow, right? Yeah, but that's maybe a logical way. But when you're designing, you have to have a subflow, right? Correct, yeah. And so, for example, when you create a main flow like this and say that, for example, you have a second component, for example, you put the flow reference. And the flow reference will talk to the subflow and do what it's supposed to do, and then return the information to the main flow. Yeah, it's like it's not going there and coming back the information to the main flow. It's not like that. When you refer a subflow, all the subflow components will come and sit over here in the main flow. The flow reference place. It replaces the flow reference. Wow. Okay, I'm with you, but somehow, because the other example you gave, which like most of the sub-functions or sub-flows or subroutines, all that stuff that we have for other programs. You know the subprograms, subroutines. Usually it's outside the main program. It does the calculation and you get the return or the answer back to the main. Here you're saying that you might design it as a subflow. But once you have a flow reference, everything that's inside that flow reference, configuration within the subflow, all that component they will be like logically in the main flow, or they will be like all that information will programmatically or system wise, they will be part of the main flow. Yeah, so once you configure a flow reference, so what happens is the logically, all the flow reference components will become part of the main flow. Subflow components will become part of the main flow. So sometimes then, if that's the case, yeah, sometimes you don't have to use a flow reference. But we need to use a flow reference to refer the subflow. Without using flow reference, you can't refer subflow. Yeah. Alright, I'm with you. I'm just challenging you. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, let's discuss. Yeah, I think I now understand. Anyway, the point here is that if there's a subflow, is there a flow reference in the main flow? Anything that I refer to them and flow reference. I need to think like it's in the main flow within the main flow. Yeah, got it. So let me go back to the slides. Subflow used to compress usable logic in application when subflow is invoked from another flow. The subflow components become part of the calling flow. Calling flow is the main flow. Subflow doesn't have source and error had exceptions. Because subflow is not an independent component. Somebody should, give input to subflow. Sorry, somebody need to call the subflow. Subflow is invoked using a flow reference common computation logic inside the subflow. It would invoke by many flows. Many flows wherever it needs that logic. Subflow is not a single component. Let me show the subflow component. Simple subflow component. It's a simple box. Nothing is there, right? Yeah. I have one quick question. Yeah, sure. Is there like a subflow? Yeah, wonderful question. I'm coming to that point only. Okay, alright. Very passionately listening. I appreciate your humble. That's nice. Here, what happens is if you use a flow reference, the flow reference referring the subflow, and whatever component inside the subflow. Now, in this scenario, there is only one component, the set payload component. But probably it may have multiple components also. All these components will come and replace the flow reference. So after the flow reference, how the flow looks like is listener, set, payload and logger. It becomes like that to visualize. You can realize the flow, right? listener, and the set payload replaces the flow, reference, and logger. The flow becomes like that, the flow reference. Got it. I see. Okay, now the question I come to. I want to answer the question. It's like this, yeah. So usually we thought that the flow will refer sub flow reference and subflow can refer another subflow. Or even a subflow can refer a flow. But there will. So then, if that's the case, say that you have a main flow and you have a flow reference to subflow. Then you're going to create another flow reference inside the subflow. Correct. And then remember the logic that the subflow references will be part of the main flow. So the second subflow within the subflow. I'm sorry. So if you have a flow reference in the subflow, right? Does that mean then whatever in the flow reference, that subflow information, it will be part of the main or it will be? I'm sorry. I'm not sure if I explained well, but yeah. Are you following me? Yeah, I'm following you. The point you taught me now was that every time you have a flow reference and there's a subflow there, any component in the subflow, they will be part of the main flow, right? Now let's say we introduce subflow, right? So the first subflow, we have a flow reference. Yeah. And that flow reference is pointing to second subflow, right? So the component of the second subflow, is it going to be part of the first subflow or is going to be part of the main flow? Component of the second subflow. It might be, see, I will have a sweep first. So using the flow reference, right? You can refer a flow can refer a subflow or a flow can refer another main flow. It's not always, it's not like that. Using flow reference, flow only refer to subflow. Flow can refer another main flow. Okay, that's first point, okay. And second point is the flow can refer a subflow. In subflow, we will put some other flow reference component. Using that, we can refer one more subflow. Yeah, that's right. Or using this flow reference component, we can refer a flow also. Either whatever. Okay. So if you have a flow, you may have one flow reference. That is calling one flow or one subflow. Yeah. And you can put one more flow reference to call another subflow. And this subflow has one more flow reference that is calling another subflow. And this flow reference has one more calling one more subflow. It's like this, okay. So, but the point I want to understand is that on these subflows about this one, yeah. If you have a flow reference, okay, yeah, is the logic that wherever you assign or create a flow reference, the flow reference will look like the component of the subflow will be part of the wherever you define the flow reference, right? Right? Yeah. So, for example, if you could in this diagram here, if you could make the say that, for example, like if you put this is the main one in one down, maybe call it A here. So what happens is, see, assume this final subflow has 3 components. Whatever these 3 components will come and occupy over here in this space. That's right. That's my question. That's good. So whenever you configure the flow reference, right? Yeah. All the components will move to the subflow that you configure. The flow reference correct. Now, all this will move over here and all this will move over here. This will become like this wave flow. So it can go to any level. It is not like it is supposed to stop at one point. No, it will tool to any level. But what happens is, whenever the flow reference, they are all replaced by all the subflow components replaced by the flow reference. It will go like this, right? So when, for example, when flow is referring other flow, not subflow, right, as in the flow is referring other main flow. Yeah, what happens is, in that case, only the process components take into consideration, the source ignored. Only the process. Whatever the process section, this will become part of over here. It will come over. Sit over here. It's good also. Okay, but my little question also is that there should be only one main flow, right? In the flow. In your application. Yeah, in my application. It's not, the rule is not there. You can have multiple main flows in your application. Okay, yeah, multiple main flows. But ideally, when you develop an API, it will create only one main flow for application, and all the requests will go with the outer. Okay, and the router routes all the request different subflows. Let me show you one other project. Wow. Over here. See, this is only main flow. This is the only flow that will take request from the external world and it routes the request to different other flows. See, this is also main flow, but the source is not defined over here. Okay, so if there is no source, means it can't receive message from external world. If the main flow is defined, but there is no source, means it won't get the message from external world. But internally one flow can refer other flow. This kind of flows we call a private flow. So this is only called inside your application only. That's why, okay. So this is not, and also it's not a subflow. It's not a subflow. What is that? Is it private? Is it a private flow? What is it? It's not a main flow only. If you want, you can put some configuration, some source here. That option is there over here. But subflow, there is no such option. If you can't do subflow, there is no source component itself. You can't put a source to this component, but the main flow your wish. You want to configure a source. If you want to receive message from a specific source system, you configure a source. If you don't want, you don't configure. So this one like the RabbitMQ. This one like the post message application. So what is it getting the input from the other flow? Can call this flow. So here your router is calling this flow. But you may have a main flow. And for example, this is one flow, this is one flow. So I can call this flow from here. Okay, I put a flow reference. And I can call in the flow reference. I can configure that on the post messages. So what happens is, this will call this flow. So we will talk about that one, don't worry. Excellent, thank you. Now it's very fascinating. It's a lot of options, but you got to know how they communicate, how the route works. Correct? Practice all these basic things and it will, that's what I said, you will know. You will also. Wow, I cannot wait to master the year. And hope you got the concept of subflow right. Yep, I do. Just blindly remember one thing. The subflow can be called in the flow reference component. Right? When you use the flow reference component, if you refer any subflow, all the components of subflow will come and replace the flow reference component. Got it? That's right. So let me show you a simple application demo here. I have already developed two applications. What I will do is, I will configure one flow reference. Let me show the flow reference component. Flow reference component. See here? Just focus on these two flows only. This flow name is Demo Project Flow 2. Just I'm changing some flow. Yeah, for our readable devices. Right? So what happens is I've configured one flow reference component. If we click on the flow reference component, it will show you the properties to configure. It is asking the flow name, means which flow you want to refer here in the flow reference component. I need to configure the flow name, right flow or subflow. Here I have subflow. This subflow name is subflow. I'm configuring. I want to refer that one I can call like subflow. So what happens? This will call the subflow. Only one thing you need to tell is you need to tell what is the flow name you want to refer in the flow reference component. Get it? So the target value. Yeah, that I will tell. After variables, we have the variables topic. Okay. After variable, I'll come back to that one. Now coming to the variables. What is your idea of variables ML in any programming language? To store information, right? Excellent, fantastic. To store the information that is required in your application after some time or whenever we want to retrieve that information. That kind of information we store inside variables. Right, yeah. Similar thing applies in the Mule also. In Mule also, if you want to store something, we use the variables. Variables are used to store the values or address you call something. And you got some value from that system. You can store that one. You call a database and you get the results in the database. You want to store that result set. You can store inside the variables. Here the scope of variable is the point where it is declared to till the end of the flow. So here this example, I create a variable over here. This is called my variable. So from this point onwards to the last component of the flow, the variable is available. You can access that variable. But we cannot access this variable prior to that one. Here in this component, we cannot access because this point, the variable, is not created. That is second point. And variables are accessed using the was keyword was.variable name. Whatever variable name, we can give the variable name once created. By giving the was.variable name, we can pick up the value of that variable. It is the expression to retrieve that variable. and there is some set variable component available component palette. Using that set variable component, you can create a variable, and we will also have remove variable component. You want to remove the variable using that. Remove variable component. We can remove that. So let me create one simple variable. I can show you. It is very simple concept. It won't take much time. We want to create a variable set variable component and creating a variable. As you click on the variable, you can see the property section. You need to give the name of the variable. So I am giving the name as fruit, something like that. Give you any name. This is my name of the variable, and value I am storing is something like apple. Now I am this one. I am putting some other component. I want to access the variable. How can I access the variable? This is here. If you see that something like effects, switch to expression mode. And now this is a text mode by different text mode. Text mode means I want to write some text like value of quote variable. If you want to like this quote variable, then I need to use a text variable, a text mode. In the text mode, if you want to print something, I need to write expression explicitly like this hash dot. I want to write, I need to give expression explicitly because I am in the text mode. So sometimes you don't want like this, you want to do expression mode. In that case, what you do is just click on this one. You will go to expression mode directly. Hash and this one now hash dot. You can write now, this is where we want to access after. Logger use some reason. You don't want to continue this variable. You want to remove that variable. Then I have a remove variable component, remove variable here. What is my variable name? Let me copy that from here. Do like this, but afterwards you cannot access this variable again. So now, one more point you need to remember is, what is the scope of the variable means? It is accessible only in this scope if you write one more flow. And I write one more flow here, and I am trying to access this variable. It does not exist. I am trying to access the variable fruit. It is not in that scope, in this variable, in this logger. If I try to access where is the dot fruit, it won't. We will get null value because this is different flow, this is different flow, that is right. How about if there is a subflow there after the variable? After the variable subflow, yeah, I will take one fresh application that will demonstrate that one. I better understand purpose. We will play around all this kind of things. I will do the positive name as a variable. Very good question. I will do this demo. I know our normal programming and concept. The variables are always local, right? Unless you, global type of okay. Yeah, unless, for example, like you passing as a parameter to another subflow, something like that. Here is the catch. Here is a very important point. Now you came. You arrived at a very important point. This question is very, very important. Whatever question you asked me, it improves your understanding of this concept. Broadens your understanding. Now the concept we are discussing. Now I am creating some flow listener. Then I am conferring some whatever default values. You focus on the variables and subflows and this stuff. Okay, now what I am doing is here. Now you need to tell. Okay, I want to tell you little on this stuff. Now what I am doing is I am creating one subflow. In this subflow, I am creating some variable. Okay, subflow, I am creating a variable name is CD, that is something like that. Alright. So now what I am doing is I am creating some flow reference. In the flow reference, I am referring the variable subflow. So this one right now. After that, what I am doing is I am putting some order. I am trying to access the variable. Yeah. See. Yeah, you are right. So based on what we learned from previous section. Yeah, then this variable will be available into the main flow. Yeah, excellent. Right? Because the flow reference, whatever the flow reference is pointing to it, will be part of the main flow. Exactly. Exactly so. But what I was asking is that say that if this variable is if this variable is part of the main flow variable, right? This variable is part of the main flow. Then can you then call that? Yeah. Can you call that variable inside the subflow? Yeah, put like this. Now you need to tell me. Okay, C variable is a part of main flow and in subflow I am referring this one. Right, so I do not know. Yeah, something tells me we can but I do not know. Yes, same logic. You are less very. Your answer is very, very great. See, when the variable is become the part of the main flow, this logarithm will also become the part of main flow, right? Whenever the flow reference is there. The logarithm will go and execute in the flow reference place. That is right. When it is executing in the flow reference place, the variable is available because just due to it is the part of main flow, right? Got it? So the flow is available. It will print that one, no issues. So it will work. It will work. But even though we are referring the variable that is not part of the flow, not part of subflow, but this flow reference will do the magic. You are right. You are right. You are right. That is right. The flow reference makes. That makes that if there is no flow reference over here, it will not work. This is independent flow. This is independent. There is no relation between this one and this one. Yeah, that is right. It will not work. It will not accept that. So the only way flow, main flow and subflow have a relationship or a connection is there is only what you call a flow reference. There is no other function or there is no other. Exactly correct. Okay, got it. Thank you, correct exactly. Go ahead. So some people confused that in the interviews they will ask the what is scope of variable where we access. We will say that, okay, the scope of variable is only on the flow. It will not access the variable in other flows. Then they put the flow reference and ask again. In that case, what happens is, if you put the flow reference, the component of the reference will become part of the calling flow. Therefore, it will not be available. That is right. That is right. It is not like control coming over here and going back. It is all become part of the main flow. Got it. So that is about the variables and coming about the target one. You asked me a question, what is target? Now the flow reference. Let me put the flow reference. What I am doing is setting some set. Payload is a component used to set something in the payload. See in the Mule event, we have the three sections: attribute section, payload section, variables. So you want to set something to payload. We can set using the set payload component. Okay, so in the set payload component, I am writing something like some random thing. I am writing. Right. So now what happens is assume this is the flow reference. Right, referring to this subflow. Means what happens is this logger and set payload will go and replace this flow reference and it is put over here. I see. Now what I am doing is after that I am putting some logger component over here. I am printing the payload. I am printing the payload at this point. How to access the payload? Right, so let me quickly run this one and show what is. Yeah, it is running. You know, I am just wondering how I want to like right now when you saved it automatically runs your program. Correct, yeah. Mine, I have to right click and say run the program. What did you do to configure to have the program run automatic? It is not like by the default behavior. Sometimes ID will start over here. You need to restart your IDE, restart the independent platform. Sometimes happens for me also. It will start and that moment I restart the independent platform. If it does not work, I will re-download it, or if I have already downloaded the file, I will re-execute and run again the API Studio. Yeah, so every time I need to run on this kind of program project, I have to right click in somewhere in the white area on the top and I say run. But I see your program, it runs. No, there is no expectation. It is a default behavior only for me. Sometimes something happens like that, so I will change the API Studio simply. So now if I send the request over here, this is the payload in subcode. This I will get the response. So what happens is, you see the log at the last one. See the log at the console. The payload is, this is the payload in subcode. Here this one the payload is, and what is the payload printed? This is a payload in subcode means. This will, because how it happens is these two components will go and sit over here, become over. Now, at this point, you want to print the payload. Whatever payload you set over, that becomes the payload. It is clear? Now my requirement is, I am calling the subflow and whatever the payload that is coming from the subflow, I want to store that to a variable. Let us see these two components are executing over here. So, after executing whatever the payload coming out of this execution, I want to store to a variable. That is my requirement, because in this case, what happens? See, I am hitting this one. This time I am posting something. I am posting some data. I am posting to the flow. So this data I am posting. If this data I am posting, what happens is in the Fourier flow component set payload, it will replace the payload I am sending from the postman on top of that. This will go. This will get replaced overwritten. Overwritten, right? I do not want that one. Whatever the payload that is coming to the flow, that has to continue to land, and the result of execution of the flow reference, I want to store to a variable. That is my requirement. If that is the requirement, what you do? You need to configure something like a target. So target, I need to give a variable name where you want to store the flow reference execution. So here I am giving a target variable name as flow execution map some flowx. And I put some logger component here. I want to print the flow execution map. Flow execution map. Now what happens is these two components, logger and payload, will go and execute at this place. But the execution result, the set payload, will go to this variable. It will not override the existing payload. Now, if you want to print the payload over here, what payload it prints is whatever payload we sent from the initial one. This payload will get printed. This payload will not get overwritten by the flow reference execution. Little tricky, right? Yeah, so one tiny question, one small question. Where is the target one? So you don't have to declare the target variable. No, it's not required. Always the only scenario where you want to store the flow execution, subflow execution to some variable. In that case, only we will pass with target variable. It is not mandatory by default. What happens is it will overwrite the existing payload. So by default, the subflow execution must overwrite the execution and overwrite the payload. But you don't overwrite. You don't want to disturb the existing payload. In that case, what you can do is the execution of subflow. You can bypass to a variable. If you have such requirement, then only go for the variable. Usually, I won't teach this one at this point. I will teach this concept after 3 to 4 sessions. But you asked. Therefore, I had little confuses. This one I understand. But this is not mandatory as of now. Do not practice this one. After 2 sessions, you will understand. You want to practice multiple flows. You get idea, I will show. I will show the assignments of last session and this session. So once you practice all those assignments, then you can get complete idea about the target variable. Okay, no, at this point. Just remember that if you do not configure the target variable, the existing payload will be overwritten. First point, if you configure the target variable, the existing payload will not be overwritten. The flow execution result will go to that variable. This flow got executed. The result of this execution will go to this variable. Now let me go here and let me clear the console. Yeah, this console is clear. Now it comes from that clear also. Now let me run once twice. Let me save it. So what happens if I send, see this logger, the first logger. The first logger prints like null what you are printing over here, the first logger. I think you are printing this variable first logger. Yeah, this logger, this logger, this logger. Variable, yeah, variable the CD. So in that case, if you configure target anyway, this C, the variable is created after this one. This is not available to use the flow reference because we created a CD variable before we are calling over here this one. The variable is not created, therefore it become null. And this is the second logger. The second logger is the payload, is printing the payload. The payload is the payload, whatever payload we are sending from the client application that is got printed over here, and the final logger. Final logger is flow execution var. That is the execution result of the subflow. That is this one. Actually, this is the payload itself that has to come, but this logger, if you see the final logger, is the outcome. This is the payload in the subflow. This is actually variable. We are extracting from the variable. So this is extracting this from the variable. Variable name is flow execution var. So how we are extracting that content from this variable? This variable is created in the flow reference. Right? Yes, so the last line. Okay, on the logs. Last one is not the last logger for some reason. Yeah, this is the last one, right? That's that. That was supposed to print the XML. But here we are. This last logger is supposed to print the payload. The post from the and a postman, but somehow the second logger, not the last one. The second last one. Yeah, this one. Yeah, it is what? It's what prints the last file. Okay, I see. I think I know it's not. Yeah, because payload. And then we say target. It's confusing. I don't know. Yeah, I'm thinking. I don't know. So if you see the logger, the console, right? For example, which one? This one. It looks to me that's the last thing it gets printed. The second log, yeah. Yeah, because that one says that the payload is right. Yeah, I'm not okay. Let me put something here also. Yeah, I want to put the link. This is the last logger. Now I put some text for your understanding purpose. Last but one is the simple payload is. So now I'm sending the payload. This is the payload. I'm sending the JSON payload. So let me save this one. Say now I'm saving. Now the last but one logger is the payload is. What is the payload? The JSON we sent from the postman. Right. And the last logger is the software execution sent to variable. Right. So that shows the XML. I'm sorry, JSON. Now this one. Actually, we are extracting from the variable. The final logger we are extracting from the variable called flowx, where you will get the idea. Where we get the flowx, where from the flow reference. Flow reference. Actually, we will not put any set variable component with the flow reference where, but as part of the flow reference, where what you do is exclude the subflow and after execution, the result of the subflow put inside this lab. And that's what we're printing, the last log. Yes. If you don't configure this one, what happens? If you don't configure target variable, you will get the payload. Whatever that payload, this payload will be already in the existing payload. What you are sending right on top of this, the payload you are setting will become the payload. This will be the payload, right? Alright, now 1 second. I will explain for your understanding purpose. Now it is started. I could clear this one. And now I will execute. Send it. Now see the results. Itself becomes the payload in the subflow. Now see the second one, the second logger. This is the payload in subflow. So what happens? Whatever payload we are sending, that become overridden by this payload, right? Got it. So that is important of the target component. Alright? Yeah, that's really powerful. Excellent. So hope you got idea in the set payload. Sorry, flow, reference, subflow and the variable, the three concepts. So there's two type of variables. One that we set variable like the top. And the other variable is the target variable, correct? Target variable you use to store information is on that. And on the like flow references. So is this the only place that you use a target variable in the flow references? Oh, or you could have another place to use. Right, so great, it is used in so many components. So many components across they have a target variable. But for example, you might have some database. I'm telling at a high level. Yeah. Database select query is there. Means what this component will do is it will query the database and get the list database. That's right. Okay, now if I don't configure the target variable, what happens? Is it queries the database and the response of the database result will overwritten on top of the extreme query. That's got overwritten. The result of the select statement. What happens if you don't have a target variable? What would happen if you don't have a target variable? Yeah. If you don't have a target variable, the result from the database query will become the new payroll. Oh, new payroll. See, in the database here, there is something called target variable over here. If you call the target variable, what happens is the database execution store to this variable. Yeah, nice. So you can take any component over here. In the new component palette, you can find the target variable. Fundamentally same. Yeah, I do. So that's about the target variable, and this one is also. Now let me talk about the second part. You have time, right? So as part of our agenda, one moment let me have a drink of water. We discussed about one of the important components, VST test component. Right. So usually we develop different kinds of APIs. Most of those are STPs. STPs means majorly they are on the HTTP based APIs only. We have the something called system APIs. I'll discuss a little about architecture and that system APIs. What is a system API? So what system API means? They talk to backend systems like databases, FTP servers, Salesforce. Right. So I read the part. System APIs and process APIs. Very wonderful. And experience APIs. So we have different set of APIs in the world. So one API we call orchestrate multiple system APIs. So how we see communication happens between APIs most of times. All the REST APIs using HTTP protocol. HTTP as a base protocol. So to call an HTTP endpoint, we have a component called HTTP request component. Using this HTTP request component, we can call HTTP service. So we can call any HTTP service running on the internet. Today I'll demonstrate one service calling in the internet. And we can call a service. Suppose I have two applications. Application 1, app 1 and I have app 2. In app 2, I configure one listener. And from the app 1, I configure one HTTP request component. I can call the same message to this listener. These two, App 1 and App 2, are running in the same URL runtime, Internet. Okay. So in the first scenario, we are calling a service that is running on the Internet in a different environment, different thing. In the second scenario, I deploy two applications. One application is calling other application running in the same URL tree runtime. Right. And you may have inside the new app one. Also, you can deploy one more flow. And you can call like this. But this is not recommended. We won't do this one. It's not at all recommended. The same application. We won't do HTTP call. HTTP call is some kind of expensive call. We always do the external application only. But it's possible. It's possible to call and import the running internet calls. Okay. Now we configure some HTTP call. And I'll show you how to configure HTTP call. So at this point, I'm removing stuff. And we have a sleep request component. Right? Because the request component is asking about which service you want to call. So I want to call something like some JSON based service. So there is some free fake APIs available in the network to test our applications. So this is one of the sites we can test our applications. So here I have one URL called users. You can see. If you go to users, you can see some JSON payload of users. Right? You can see different users information. So I want to call this URL. I want to get this user's email. Oh, can you go back? How do you get this JSON format? How do you get that? Just go to the internet and get the JSON placeholder. JSON placeholder. Okay, JSON placeholder. This is fake web service actually. Fake REST API. And I come over here. And here we have different URLs over here. Posts, comments, all the photos and users. Click on the users. I get this user's JSON. So I want to call this URL. This is a free service. Now see, this is your host name, right? This is where the service is running JSON placeholder type report come. Copy this host name. And in the request component configuration, the configuration section. Click on the plus icon over here. And it asks for the host name. Host, give the host name. The default port is 80. You need not give 80, okay? It will take default. Don't worry about that. Now you have the path called users right/users. This path you can view in the path section. Oh. So you can see JSON placeholder type report com/users. It's called the configurator, right? I'm sorry about that. Oh, it's okay. So now this is the request component. I call this service. Right. Now let me run this one. Let's see this one. It started. Yeah, it started. Let me just put this in. Now I'm not posting anyone. Get is enough because I'm not posting anything, right? Yeah. So I got the result right. Okay. The postman response. I'm getting this one. How I'm getting this one? You're calling this one right. Oh, now you ask me a question, is a target variable available for only the flow reference? What my requirement is, I'm posting something over here. For example, I'm posting something, some payload. I'm posting. Right. If I invoke this one, see, I'm getting different payload. Right. So what my requirement is, I will call the HTTP service, but the response from HTTP service I want to store to a variable. I don't want to overwrite my existing payload. Payload, yeah? In that case, go to the request component. And there is, you can find advanced over here. Notice the section. Configure the target variable. HTTP, something like that response. Oh. So if it's empty, it's going to whatever that returns, right? The payload is going to be whatever that returns. Correct. I'm putting some in the part. Printing that variable. Response is what's that? So it has .htp response. One. Let's stop it. Yeah, I got the same response. Whatever request I send, I get the same response. But it saved the request to the variable. So I'm printing the variable in the logger. If you see that one, HTTP response, right? That's what the user is saying. But here you get that the target variable is not important, but I'm sure just I am. You asked. I showed you that. We need to focus on some other things. That's right. That's very good. So now see the request component is, it is nothing but a simple request component, nothing but HTTP client. Like it is like a postman. Yes. So from the postman, I show you how to send a standard header in the last section. Okay, right? And how to send a query parameters and how to send a URL parameters. All things you can able to send, right? The same way in the Mule request component also, we can able to send the header parameters. We can send the query parameters. We can able to send the URL parameters, all the stuff. You can see what we have. Headers, query parameters, URL parameters, oh I see. You can send the No, one more important, the most important concept in the domain. Let me snip it. This is very important concept. Now this is a postman, for example, a postman. From the postman, I'm sending a request to this. Right. Now what request I'm sending? What kind of request I'm sending? This is HTTP. It could be. Like so I'm sending HTTP message. It could either be GET or both, right? I'm sending HTTP message. GT also forget, I'm not sending payload. Message will go there. But payload is empty in case of GT. In case of POST, the payload is empty. Header not payload body. You can call it body instead. And what we understand is that there is a component that is able to understand HTTP request. And it transforms to new unit. Right. It builds it constructs prepares the new unit, whatever, new unit. And how it prepares the new unit. That is also a very, very important concept. I had that thing put in the attributes section. Attributes, yeah. Payload. It might be empty at this point. Because there is no way to create. If you create a variable, the variable will go into this section. That also you can see. Okay, if you create a set variable, that variable will go to this section. Now, we are not creating any variable, so variable is just in there. Now, in this request component, what we're doing is I'm calling some JSON placeholder. Something like some other external service, right? Okay, some external service, HTTP service. So now what I told is this request component equal to Postman. Now this component has a new unit in hand. Now will I send new unit to this HTTP request service to JSON placeholder? I call some HTTP JSON placeholder, right? So what kind of request it sent to the HTTP service? Get the post, right? Yeah, get the post method. What message? What message it sent? You see, the listener converts the incoming HTTP message to the new event message, and new event message is given to your HTTP request component. That's clear, right? And HTTP request component is calling some JSON placeholder service. I show you, right? So is it sending the new event to JSON placeholder service? What message it is sending? One message. So it is HTTP service, right? Yeah. HTTP service understands only HTTP message. It won't understand any kind of message, right? That's right. So what is the responsibility of the request component is even though it has new event in hand, it converts the new event back to HTTP message and send to the HTTP system. Okay. So it takes the new event and converts the HTTP message again. Because it is sending a message to HTTP system. The HTTP system will understand only HTTP message. It won't understand the new message, right? Yeah. Okay. Now it's preparing the HTTP message again. This request component is preparing HTTP message. How it prepares HTTP message is basically it contains two sections, header section and body section. I don't know about it. The payload is placed inside the body section. And it won't copy the attributes back to header. This won't happen, remember. While incoming, the header is placed to attributes. Body is placed to payload while incoming. While listener is preparing the new event. How listener prepares is header is placed to attributes and body is placed to payload. But when request is preparing the HTTP object HTTP message, only payload is copied to the body section. Yeah, body. and in attributes in header section. If you configure headers inside the request component, those headers will go. I showed you right. Yeah, it will go to the header. Yeah, as part of the request component. Headers, query parameters, URL parameters. If I configure these query parameters, URL parameters, then they'll go to the header section. They will go to the header right. Attributes won't copy back to header section. So at this logger point, we want to access the attributes. No, we can access attributes section because we will lose the attributes whenever there is an outgoing call. This is a very important point. We will lose the attributes. Whenever we have an outgoing call. Whenever we have outgoing call. Okay, request. Yeah, request is going out, right? So at this point, the initial attributes that we sent to the postman, they're no longer available because in the conversion point, the attributes are not copied to this new message. What happens is this request, this service executes it, and service sends a response back to your request component. What request you sent is the request you sent a sticky response. So logger cannot output or do anything from the response. Yeah, logger can output from the response, but it cannot touch the request. Like what we do in request. The logger cannot see that. Logger can see. It won't have the response. The request is not the scope. So here one more point is the HTTP response will go back to the HTTP request component. And this request component will again transform the HTTP response to Mule event. And Mule event is handed over to the logger component because logger understands only Mule event, right? Okay, yeah. Okay, so here are the trickies. Let me clear it. So now I understand. So when he is doing a request, right? And he's sending a header on the body, right? Yeah, at that time, the format is the HTTP message. And it's not a mule message. So that there is no attribute. Or at what point you are saying no. The first point. At what point you are saying? I didn't get your question. Yeah, so I want to understand the part that you say that you will lose attributes. Okay. Are we talking about the request or we're talking about the response? Yeah, very good question. I will do the demonstration. Now let me discuss about conversion points in this concept. Okay. The first request I will put in the header. So this is the first HTTP request which has the Mule listener right. And Mule listener will transform that and it will create the Mule event message. Contains attributes payload. So header is copied to the attribute section, body is copied to the payload section. And this HTTP request component is calling HTTP service. And HTTP request component is calling HTTP service. right? So it won't send the mule event. HTTP service understands only HTTP message, right? Therefore, what this request will do, it constructs the HTTP message. So from mule event to HTTP. Oh, I said okay. HTTP service. Attribute is sorry. Payload is copied to the body section. And if you configure any parameters in this request component, they will go over here. But header is not copied to the sorry. Attributes are not copied to the header. Are you drawing something? Yeah, I'm drawing. You are not able to see. I only see that. Oh, now I see. No, they came back. Oh, I'm sorry. It's okay. I'm drawing different colors. Yeah, I know, but I'm following you right now. Well, good. Yeah, I don't know if that piece was not showing up here, but it's good. Now I can see it. Yeah. We do the attributes right. Yeah. In the next step, you will understand. So this request will go to the HTTP service. And HTTP service responds back to the request. And in this session, the request and the response is the data or the message from HTTP service. It's not a mule event. Mule event will flow only between the mule components only. If it is going to external component, it is HTTP only. Oh, that's really cool. That's a good understanding. That's very good point. Anytime we go outside the mule system, we use HTTP service. Mule event is proprietary between the mule components only. Okay, got it, okay. Now this HTTP request component takes charge of conversion. It takes the mule response, HTTP response, and again converts the new mule event and provides that mule event to the other component. Right? This is first one. This is second one. And third one, it calls the mule service, right? Can you see this last part? Yeah. When we get the response. Yeah, when the response. If the MuleSoft components want to utilize that data, yeah, they can. Mule request component. Mule request component. If a mule, like when you get the result back, when the requester get the response back, yes. Say that, for example, now the next component is a logger. Exactly, yeah, can. The logger can access the request. It can access the request, right? Yeah, because logger need to access what kind of message the logger understands. Only the attributes of the payload. Only that one, right? That is mule event. Only the logger understands, right? Yeah, now from the HTTP request HTTP service, we're getting HTTP response, okay? What this request component will do is it again prepares a mule event again. Okay, got it, and use it to logger. Now I'm with you. My understanding was the requester response or HTTP format is not a MuleSoft. But I didn't know the part that it also prepares the response as a mule event. No. This request also creates a new mule event, and that mule event provides the logger component. That's right. Now this mule event is different. The mule event that the listener creates is different, And the mule event the request creates is different. There are two different mule events, right? Okay, so the attributes over here in the first mule event are not available over here in the second mule event. Because this mule event is prepared based on the response from the HTTP request, HTTP service component. That's right. This mule event prepared from the initial input from the client. But that being said, this logger, it cannot access the attributes of the listener, right? Exactly. But it can access the attributes from the response. Yeah, sure. From the response. That's good. That's nice. It's like the variable thing you mentioned. The variable only. You can only use the variable after you define. So before that, the variable didn't exist, so you cannot access it. No problem. Now I will send this thing. I will send this point. I will send some query parameter. Some query parameter is like, let's see. Some query parameter I'm sending over here. This query parameter has become a part of the attributes, right? So I'm putting some logger here and printing that query parameter. That's what I'm trying. It will be Chicago, right? Now I'm doing the HTTP request call. So this is calling the JSON type P code. This one, right? And I'm not configuring any target variable. Configure target variable, what happens? The current payload is overwritten. That will come out payload, right? The current payload is not overwritten, right? And here, after this call, I'm again configuring the logger. So we're expecting. After service call something. That is first. One is before service call and after service call. So I think it's going to be low, but it's okay, yeah. If you go to the last logger, what are we outputting? Last logger, we are outputting some HTTP response which is no longer valid. So we have to do the payload. We have to do the payload. Maybe put a logger for payload. You want to print payload, yeah? We can see. The last one. Next point, next point. I got the new payload because I'm sending one payload as a request, but I'm getting a different response, right? And what happens is the first logger huge payload. First logger. First logger the query parameter Chicago because we are passing query parameter. And the second logger, this logger, the city query parameter of service call is null. Yeah, because that is the new. Yeah. Because Chicago attributes not available there. Not available right before after service call, we got a new mule event. On the mule event, this Chicago is not available. So that is not able to. That is fine. So that is the reason we put the variable. If you put a variable override, people will store the variable like this. And in that variable, I can put something like a city. So what happens is now it's going to print. Of request. Also, we can able to extract the thing from variable. Variable is available. Yeah, but attributes are not available after the service. But variable we can able to access. So we create a variable and store the city. That's what we be getting. That's what we be utilizing it. But we're not going back and getting the attributes. Correct. Attributes are no longer available when a new mule event creates. Therefore, if you have very important attributes, like important query parameters, then we store them into variables so that's available till end of the flow. That depends upon your requirement. You store that into variable. Got it now? Second logger is null and third logger is payload that we able to see that payload. It's a payload from the service file. Got it. Now this conversion is very important. You need to analyze the things. There are three. First, initially we receive the HTTP message. Yeah, and listener converts that to mule event. Mule event flows to logger. The mule event flows to variable. Mule event flows to the request component. The request component creates HTTP request and calls the HTTP service. Yeah, after that you will get HTTP response. Then HTTP request component converts HTTP response to mule event and gives to the logger. Yeah. Okay, then the mule event. We initially receive the logger and the mule. Event here is different. This mule event created on top based on the response, right? Yeah. Okay, that mules the flow slide. So here it converts to mule. That's the thing I defined in the slides also. I will share the slides also. Please. Yeah, please. Thank you. Please share that with me. HTTP request component. HTTP request component takes the mule event as input and gives HTTP request to call HTTP service. HTTP request component receives HTTP response and converts back to mule event object. This flow is all points wise. HTTP headers, query parameters and URL parameters can be configured as part of the HTTP request object configuration. HTTP response can be stored inside. There is also a response variable. It's a search variable, right? We can create some new variable and we can store the response. Oh yeah, you're right. Like we did in the series. This is the express configuration. We can configure where it is running. That's the markup of that one. We can call. A request can call a listener. This part of request can call a listener So this is the configuration. So it's another flow. Yeah, exactly. It is a different flow. But we can't put these two flows in the same application. But this is one of the applications. This is a different application. Two different applications. So when you call another listener that did the request. Then I'm sure there's a way that I don't know. So is it like you know? I know this is just an example. You just showed me you can call another listener, but I know this one fits. This one talks to the number 2 and it talks to another listener. Then can the response of this, or whatever that we get out of the response, can it send back to the main? Yes, send back. The second flow got excluded. The response can again go back to the first flow. Okay? That is, go back to the client who called this flow. It's really pretty powerful. Conversions like HTTP response. HTTP request component converts a new event to HTTP message and invokes the HTTP service. So the request component, what request component takes the input for request component is a new event like. It takes a new event and it converts the new event to HTTP request and calls the service and gets the response. Again, converts the HTTP message to new event and gives the new event to logger. So it do the two conversions. First conversion is takes the new event and converts to HTTP. Yeah, and again take the HTTP response and convert to new event. That's right, whereas it also do the same. That's right. Listeners and converts. Yeah, but input is different. So for listener, it takes the HTTP message and converts to new event and takes the new event and converts back to HTTP. It is reversed. And finally, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.